War has engulfed Europe. Nations rallied to defend their borders, pushing back the advancing forces. A grueling war of attrition unfolds, and just as the enemy faces imminent defeat, the unthinkable happens. Terror rains down from the skies. Nuclear bombs detonate across the continent. It's the nightmare scenario everyone feared but hoped would never come. Millions will perish. Cities will be reduced to rubble. Europe will become a wasteland. It sounds like something out of a Hollywood movie, but the reality of nuclear escalation is closer than ever. Now France has devised a bold new plan, an expanded nuclear shield designed to protect all of Europe from catastrophe. Could this be the key to preventing all-out destruction? At first glance, it might seem unnecessary. After all, most of Europe is already a part of NATO, an alliance built on collective defense, so why does France extending its nuclear protection matter? More importantly, how would this impact the potential war between NATO and its adversaries? Could it strengthen Europe's deterrence, or might it escalate tensions even further? Let's delve into the specifics of nuclear deterrence, a strategy that has evolved significantly over the 80-plus years since the first and so far only nuclear bombs were ever used in war. To start, it's important to clarify what France's so-called nuclear shield actually is. Like many other nations with nuclear capabilities, France's deterrence strategy is built around the weapons themselves. Philosophically, it's a simple concept. If the country detects a launch of a nuclear-capable missile, it'll launch nuclear bombs of its own. This principle relies on fear and rational self-interest, which has historically kept nuclear-armed nations from engaging in direct conflict since World War II. After all, no one would be willing to launch a nuke on another country if they're going to get nuked themselves just minutes later. For nuclear deterrence to be effective at all, a country must establish credibility of its nuclear threat. This means demonstrating both the capability and the willingness to use nuclear weapons if necessary. A key aspect of deterrence is second strike capability, ensuring that even if a nation is attacked first, it can still respond with overwhelming force. This is why nuclear-armed submarines, which can remain hidden and launch retaliatory strikes, play a crucial role in deterrence. Another cornerstone of the strategy is mutually assured destruction. If two nations possess the ability to annihilate each other in a nuclear exchange, neither has the incentive to initiate the conflict. Some nations also maintain flexible response strategies, which include options for limited nuclear strikes to serve as a warning before escalating further. In France's case, the country has two types of nuclear weapons: submarine-launched ballistic missiles, SLBMs, and air-launched cruise missiles, or ALCMs. Unlike the US or Russia, France does not deploy land-based intercontinental ballistic missiles, or ICBMs. Instead, it focuses on a sea-air strategic deterrent to ensure the ability to retaliate against any nuclear attack. This doctrine, known as strict sufficiency, maintains only as many nuclear weapons as necessary to deter adversaries without engaging in an arms race. This has resulted in a relatively modest nuclear arsenal for France, at least when compared to the United States and Russia. While both of those nuclear superpowers each possess roughly 4,000 warheads, with around 1,500 actively deployed, France maintains a much smaller stockpile of approximately 300 nuclear weapons distributed across its two main platforms. Typically, that's still enough to deliver significant damage to anyone who attempts to use nuclear weapons. At the heart of France's nuclear capability is its strategic oceanic force, which consists of 4 Triomphant-class nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarines, or SSBNs: Les Triomphant, Les Téméraires, Les Vigilants, and Les Terribles. At least one of those submarines is on constant patrol, ensuring a second strike capability. As such, France could retaliate even if its land-based military infrastructure were destroyed. Each submarine carries up to 16 ballistic missiles, with the M51.2 variant currently in service and the more advanced M51.3 expected sometime in 2025. These missiles have a basic range beyond 6,000 miles. Since submarines are mobile by design, the 6,000-mile missile range effectively gives it the ability to strike almost any target on the globe, provided the submarine has enough time to position itself strategically in the world's oceans. For reference, Russia, the largest country in the world, spans about 5,600 miles from east to west. Meanwhile, Africa stretches roughly 5,000 miles north to south and 4,600 miles across east to west. In theory, this means nowhere would be truly safe if a submarine-launched ballistic missile were deployed by France or any other nation with similar technology and global reach. But first, have you ever wanted to build a city of your own and lead it through history? Do you have what it takes to start with a tiny village and turn it into a massive empire spanning thousands of years? If so, then you have to try out the sponsor of today's video, Forge of Empires. Forge of Empires takes you on an epic journey through time, letting you grow your city from the Stone Age to the Space Age, manage resources, develop your economy, and unlock legendary buildings like the Colosseum or Notre Dame to give your city an edge. But it's not just about building. You'll lead armies, conquer territories, and even team up with friends and guilds. And right now is the perfect time to jump in. Complete the tutorial as a new player to grab 25 forge points, 1,000 coins, and 1,000 supplies. And when you reach the Bronze Age, you'll unlock the Welcome event, a board game style challenge where you'll earn 150 raffle tickets, 2 golden dice throws, and level up your trading post to get a serious advantage, but only if you use my special link. And the best part, Forge of Empires is playable right in your browser. No downloads required, or it's also available on your phone or tablet. So what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description, claim your rewards, and start building your empire today. Each M51 missile is equipped with multiple TN-75 or Tête Nucléaire Océanique warheads, each yielding 100 to 150 kilotons, roughly 5 to 10 times the explosive power of the Hiroshima bomb, which packed 15 kilotons. If fully deployed, a single Triomphant-class submarine could deliver up to 1.5 megatons of nuclear firepower, capable of devastating multiple cities. The submarine's force is France's main nuclear shield, with a submarine on patrol presumably somewhere in the Pacific or possibly the Arctic Oceans. Any strike by an enemy would be met in kind. But France also has a defensive system built to be a bit closer to home, so to speak. Complementing France's naval nuclear force is the Strategic Air Forces, which operates Rafale B and Rafale M fighter jets. These are the land-based and carrier-based variants of France's 4.5-generation multi-role aircraft, often compared to the US-made F-35s in capability. In turn, these aircraft are armed with Air Sol Moyen Portée Améliorée, or ASMPA, nuclear cruise missiles. The ASMPA is a hypersonic air-deployed missile that travels at Mach 3 and has a range of just over 300 miles. It carries the Tête Nucléaire Aéroportée warhead with an estimated yield of 300 kilotons, making it twice as powerful as the largest warhead deployed on an M51 SLBM. By the 2030s, France plans to replace the ASPM-A with the ASN-4G, a next-generation hypersonic missile with increased range and speed. The somewhat limited range showcases the strategic importance of France's position with NATO, both geographically and geopolitically. The Rafale aircraft typically have a range of around 2,000 miles. Couple that with a 300-mile range from the missile itself, and you have a medium-range weapon. It's not exactly on the same scale as a true ICBM, which often has ranges of up to 6,000 miles and upward. However, this range could be more than enough. The distance between Paris and Moscow is only about 1,500 miles. This puts the Russian capital well within range of a land-deployed Rafale B carrying a nuclear warhead, and that's only part of France's nuclear arsenal. The biggest differentiator in how France conducts its nuclear deterrence policy compared to other countries is the politics behind it. Unlike China or India, which have signed a no-first-use policy, meaning they will never launch a nuke first, but only in response, France has a more robust strategy, so to speak. France, and to a lesser extent the US, have a preventative first-strike policy. In this scenario, the French military would determine whether, or rather which one of the country's enemies, could or would potentially launch a nuclear attack against the nation. Then the French nuclear weapons would be deployed to potentially remove nuclear launch sites if possible, or cripple the enemy's military potential. The US maintains a similar stance in that it hasn't signed a no-first-strike policy, just like France. With the US, France, and the UK all possessing nuclear arsenals, NATO benefits from a layered nuclear deterrent that extends across multiple nations and strategic platforms. Since these weapons can be used as a deterrent rather than just retaliatory measures, this gives NATO a significant defensive advantage against potential nuclear threats. The second part of how France is different from the likes of the US and the UK is how its nuclear defenses are set up. The UK maintains its own arsenal of 225 nuclear weapons, distributed between submarine and air-deployed models. They have removed fighter jets that could carry nuclear warheads and only have submarine-deployed nuclear weapons in active service. Additionally, the country's nuclear deterrence policy is directly tied to NATO itself. While the UK can independently decide when to use the nuke, it does so at the behest and protection of any other member of the alliance. Similar to France, however, is the fact that the UK also has one submarine always on patrol, and that it has a first-use deterrent policy. This gives the UK practically the same level of deterrence against nuclear weapon use. Other NATO members in Europe, such as Germany and Italy, have an entirely different approach to nuclear deterrence. Since they don't have any nuclear weapons of their own, the arsenal is borrowed from the US, which stations some of its weapons on German and Italian soil. The control over these weapons is given to the US, so the president of the US would need to declare an attack before they could be deployed. Then the weapons would be mounted onto a native nuclear-carrying aircraft, which include the German Tornado and the Italian F-35. Due to these bombs being only air-deployed, Germany and Italy have a much lower level of defense. and the rest of Europe is even worse off. In the event of an imminent nuclear attack on European soil, it would be up to the US, the UK, or France to give the directive to mount a preemptive or retaliatory strike. Granted, the US itself is going to be enough of a destructive force to keep NATO safe from an attack. The United States nuclear arsenal is the most diverse and advanced in the world, providing multiple ways to deliver nuclear weapons with strategic or long-range and tactical or battlefield capabilities. The so-called U.S. nuclear triad consists of ICBMs, SLBMs, and nuclear-capable bombers. The land-based component of the triad consists of 400 Minuteman III ICBMs, housed in underground silos across Montana, North Dakota, and Wyoming. These missiles provide rapid response capability and can be launched within minutes of a presidential order. Each Minuteman III missile has a maximum range of approximately 8,100 miles. They carry a W-87 or W-78 nuclear warhead with a yield of 300 to 475 kilotons, about 20 to 30 times more powerful than the Hiroshima bomb. These ICBMs are designed to devastate enemy military installations, command centers, and industrial hubs, and they could reach Russia or China within 30 minutes. The Minuteman III will soon be replaced by the LGM-35 Sentinel ICBM, a modernized missile with enhanced accuracy, better penetration against missile defenses, and improved cybersecurity. The sea-based component of the U.S. nuclear force is the most survivable, as Ohio-class SSBNs can remain hidden underwater for months at a time. The U.S. maintains 14 SSBNs, each capable of carrying up to 20 Trident II D5 SLBMs, ensuring a continuous at-sea deterrence presence. These missiles have a range of approximately 7,500 miles and can carry up to 8 warheads per missile, each with a yield ranging from 100 kilotons to 475 kilotons. The U.S. also has introduced the W-76-2, a low-yield 5-kiloton warhead. This option could be used to counter threats that are not the same level of nuclear proliferation or use conventional weaponry. The stealth and mobility of submarines allows them to launch nuclear weapons from anywhere in the world, making them virtually impossible to eliminate in a preemptive attack. The Columbia-class SSBNs, set to replace the Ohio-class submarines in the 2030s, will provide even better capabilities, giving the U.S. an elevated standard of nuclear defense and deterrence. The air-based component of the nuclear triad consists of strategic bombers, which offer a recallable and visible deterrent. The U.S. currently operates 2 types of nuclear-capable bombers: the B-52 Stratofortress, which carries nuclear cruise missiles, and the B-2 Spirit, a stealth bomber designed to penetrate enemy air defenses and drop nuclear gravity bombs. The B-52 is equipped with AGM-86 ALCMs, which have a range of 1,500 miles and carry warheads with a varied yield of 5 to 150 kilotons. The B-2, on the other hand, is designed to deliver B-61 and B-83 nuclear bombs, with the latter being the most powerful bomb in the U.S. arsenal, with a maximum yield of 1.2 megatons. Furthermore, the upcoming B-21 Raider stealth bomber will eventually replace the B-2 and provide enhanced capabilities for penetrating enemy defenses. Additionally, the U.S. is deploying the AGM-181 Long-Range Standoff or LRSO missile, a next-generation stealth cruise missile that will be more difficult for adversaries to detect and intercept. Adding to this is the aforementioned military installation in Germany, Italy, Belgium, and the Netherlands. These are B-61-12s, precision-guided nuclear bombs with an adjustable yield between 0.3 and 50 kilotons. They can be deployed on any manner of modern multi-role or fighter aircraft. It would give countries without a dedicated nuclear arsenal or delivery platform a more thorough nuclear deterrent than just relying on its allies. But the NATO alliance itself could be considered the biggest deterrent of them all, and that is perhaps exactly what France aims to reinforce with its most recent proposals. France believes that it shouldn't have to be alone in creating and maintaining a nuclear deterrent independently for Europe. It's possible that the French plan includes the option for countries to outright get full access to the nuclear weapons that France made. This could have a few different implications. First, a French-led European nuclear umbrella could mean that each participating member would have independent authority over when and how to use nuclear weapons, separate from NATO and its internal decision-making. By establishing multiple independent nuclear deterrents, this strategy would create a more varied and unpredictable response, making Europe a far more difficult target for any potential weapons of mass destruction or WMD attack. Right now, if someone were to attempt to destroy the European nuclear weapons, they'd have to target only 6 countries, 4 of which house only air-based nukes that the US controls. With a more independent distributed system, the scale at which a first attack would have to be made grows exponentially. An enemy would have to spend dozens of bombs to target each nuclear silo in hopes of removing those weapons before they could be deployed. Otherwise, they're forced to just annihilate the entire European continent in hopes of preventing a retaliatory attack entirely. The second implication is that France doesn't want to rely on the US to provide the bulk of Europe's nuclear deterrence. The relationship between the US and NATO is not as strong as it once was. The White House has expressed concerns over NATO members not spending enough on their own national defenses or contributing adequately to the alliance's goals. This growing lack of trust in the alliance has led some analysts to question whether the US might even consider withdrawing from NATO altogether, a move that would have unprecedented consequences for global security. This growing disinterest in NATO's European commitments has raised concerns among French President Emmanuel Macron and other European leaders. They're becoming increasingly wary of relying too heavily on US leadership for the alliance's defense and deterrence strategies. As a result, there's a stronger push for Europe to take greater control over its own security and nuclear deterrence, rather than depending solely on American decision-making. At the same time, however, France and the UK only have a fraction of the nuclear arsenal and destructive power the US has. This creates a paradox. France expanding its nuclear deterrence to cover more countries sounds like a stronger defensive strategy, but it could also mean spreading its existing nuclear arsenal too thin without actually increasing the number of warheads available. Without the UK's nuclear arsenal as additional support and the US withdrawing its nuclear weapons from European soil, a key prerequisite for implementing France's plan, France would face significant challenges in maintaining a credible nuclear deterrent. France would face significant challenges in ensuring that its nuclear deterrent is strong enough to counter a major adversary, like Russia. In essence, France needs the UK to maintain a vital supportive role if its plan of distributing the nuclear deterrent shield to the rest of Europe is going to work. This is further supported by the cost of the current nuclear program, which could give some insight into the economic limitations of expanding it. France's nuclear weapons and deterrence program accounts for 10% to 12% of its annual national defense budget, a figure similar to the UK. This explains why France is hesitant to take on the entire burden alone, making the removal of US nuclear weapons from Europe a prerequisite for even considering the plan. For perspective, France's total military budget stands at around $55 billion per year, a fraction of the nearly $900 billion the US allocates for defense. Where does that leave the current nuclear deterrence policies? Well, Europe is in a bit of a precarious spot. In late 2024, Russia changed its nuclear deterrence policy to be more ambiguous than ever before. It cited the acceptable use of nuclear weapons whenever the country's sovereignty is threatened. Most importantly, this new policy could potentially redefine nuclear deterrence. A non-nuclear capable state, backed by a nuclear-armed ally, could be considered a sufficient threat to justify a nuclear response. In the ongoing war in Ukraine, Ukraine itself is a non-nuclear nation, but it is supported by NATO, an alliance that includes 3 nuclear-armed members, the US, the UK, and France. Technically speaking, this could allow Russia to argue that it's under nuclear threat, providing a pretext, however unfounded, for a first strike. In the most extreme scenario, nothing would stop Russia from claiming justification and launching nuclear weapons tomorrow. And with the current state of nuclear deterrence, it's unclear how quickly France can act on the threats. This is due to 2 reasons. First, the combined French and British nuclear arsenals are heavily outnumbered by the Russian ones. While most of the missiles that the countries use are deployed on submarines, there's still a chance that those missiles get intercepted and don't reach the target. Given Russia's size and the country's distribution of nuclear weapon storage across the area, launching a preemptive strike would be a significant undertaking for the French military alone. Secondly, and perhaps more worryingly, is the fact that Russia, or more precisely President Vladimir Putin, has become more unstable than ever. The Russian government has alluded multiple times to possibly escalating the conventional conflict in Ukraine into a nuclear one. A report by the UK government lists numerous mentions of nuclear deterrence policy, nuclear development programs, or flat out using nuclear weapons for retaliation against the so-called NATO interference in the war. Since the bulk of France's nuclear deterrence is designed to be preemptive rather than purely retaliatory, a miscalculation or false alarm could have catastrophic consequences. If France mistakenly believed that a country was about to launch a nuclear strike, it could trigger a preemptive deployment, resulting in the immediate deaths of millions. More critically, such an attack would all but guarantee a massive and overwhelming response, plunging the world into full-scale nuclear war. And in that scenario, the outlook is bleak. A simulation of just 100 Hiroshima-sized nuclear bombs, a tiny fraction of the world's actual nuclear stockpile, predicted a global temperature drop of 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit and a 10% decrease in rainfall worldwide. The aftermath would be catastrophic. Conventional agriculture would collapse for generations. Even those who survived the initial blasts, which would likely target major population centers in North America, Europe, and Russia, would face mass starvation, radiation exposure, and a planet barely capable of sustaining human life. The simulation suggests that billions of people could die from an all-out nuclear war. And it's a war that France might unwittingly start and lose if it gambles on a country trying to use nuclear weapons. This is due to the nuclear warheads launched by submarines or intercontinental ballistic missiles being unrecallable. The extreme range at which those missiles operate means that countries have half an hour at most to determine a potential attack and mount a response. The air-based deployment, which constitutes only about a sixth of the current French arsenal, can be controlled much easier. The planes need to travel much closer to the destination to fire the missile, which gives more time to rethink the decision. On the flip side, it also gives the opponent more time to react. In truth, when it comes to nuclear warfare, there's only one true solution: the complete and permanent dismantling of all nuclear weapons. But with no country willing to disarm unilaterally, the world remains in a perpetual deadlock. NATO, Russia, China, and potentially Iran are all caught in a pseudo-stalemate, where the first nation to launch a nuclear strike would almost certainly trigger World War III. And this time, there might not be a winner. What do you think about France's plans? Is it just an attempt to reduce the influence the US has over European national defense systems? And is nuclear war a real threat? Let us know in the comments. Thanks again to the sponsor of today's video, Forge of Empires. Start building your empire, research technologies, and explore history today, all right in your browser. And don't forget to use the link in the description for additional rewards when completing the tutorial and reaching the Bronze Age. Now go check out what would happen if Russia and NATO went to war day by day, or click on this video instead.